They could have gotten new cars and other things, but they gave up all those things to live into the vision that they believe God had given them. I can follow someone like that.
In the late 1970s, a group of Calvin College alumni were deeply moved by the love of Jesus.
We heard about some communities that were living like second chapter of Acts and that were selling their expensive homes and moving into under-resourced neighborhoods and living together, sharing their money, and it just sounded so much like the way of Jesus that we had to visit, and once we visited and we saw the power of it, we wanted to live in community also, so we asked our friends if they wanted to like move in together and share our possessions and, you know, live like second chapter of Acts, and most of them said, no way, but, you know, 4 of us said yes.
They started the community of Living Waters. They had a men's house and a woman's house, and they were taking people in that were really struggling in life and ministering to them on a daily basis.
We were very idealistic. We just thought, okay, you know, these were the years of Jesus people, you know, the California coast, and they're just, you know, witnessing to people, and people are becoming Christians. So we did that too. We set up microphones by the local gas station, and our singing group would just start singing songs, worship songs, then they'd share testimonies to the crowd that gathered, just like Jesus people in California, but, you know, without the results, you know, so, you know, didn't seem like anything was really happening from that. And we did a lot of other things. We had a used clothing store. We had a third world industry store. We started a story hour.
We would drive through this neighborhood.
We would drive through this neighborhood, the Roosevelt Park neighborhood. And I remember one particular Sunday riding through here, and John just said, we were stopped at a traffic light, he said, this is going to be the New Jerusalem. And I really think at that time that was a prophetic voice.
And we prayed about where we could live in this city and make a difference. And we felt that the Lord was leading us to move into the Granville Avenue area.
We had like 7 of us. We bought 2 homes on Stope. We bought one on London. And the idea was that we're going to minister to the adults in the neighborhood.
Basically, it wasn't until somebody in our group said, why don't we just invite our neighbors over for supper and sing some songs. And so the girls in our group went up and down the street to Rodriguez's, Ortiz's, Soto's, Crow's, Lopez's, knocked on the door. You want to come over and sing some songs on Sunday and eat some food? And they actually said yes.
Because we were playing music, we had 2 people playing guitar. And so the kids in the neighborhood, they're actually on our porch. They're pushing against the screen door, they're looking inside, and they're really kind of, what's going on in there?
Until finally we just said, hey, these kids have got to have their own special night, you know. So Tuesday night became a night called Kid Power. It was dubbed by one of the kids. And originally we had Kid Power right in our house.
They started gathering themselves, simply feeding and doing Bible study with children in the neighborhood who parents didn't have high-class jobs, didn't have the money.
We would have this rotation of food, these good Dutch casseroles, probably tuna fish casserole, or maybe boiled hot dogs, or spaghetti noodles with Prego sauce. One of the things for that was we saw kids just going to the party store, getting a bag of chips and Coke, and that was their supper. So we knew we had to kind of meet some physical and nutritional needs, as well as spiritual needs. And the kids kept coming. And they kept coming in droves, and so we would drive through the neighborhood with 2 vans and pick up kids, and it got to the point where it's just, we were overwhelmed.
Pretty soon there were 75 kids coming to the house that I live in. We're using every room in the house to teach lessons, to feed, to sing, and whatever. Then 2 houses, 3 houses.
And eventually we bought an office building on Granville Avenue. So we used the patients' rooms for classrooms, and that was Kid Power.
The local school was ranked 3rd lowest in the state of Michigan. We just felt like we love these Kid Power kids. They have a lot of academic needs and social needs and spiritual needs. Way too much to meet in 2 hours a week.
I think it was 1980.
We were in the parking lot of Granville Avenue Church.
We met Reverend Pontier, who said,
I think it's time for you to start a school. And at first they said,
no. In fact, we just laughed. And he said, I think it's God's timing for you to start a school. Even though we laughed at first, we started praying about it, and we just began to think like, yeah, we could have a school for kids from the neighborhood, a very small school. We'd throw out all the textbooks, we'd make all the materials ourselves, we would teach them to read from stories that they dictated about their own lives. It would be centered on Jesus, it'd be open to everybody. Tuition would be based on income, because we knew their income wasn't much. We knew there wasn't going to be much to actually support the teachers, and so the other part of our great plan was that the teachers would work for free.
We've been involved with Kid Power. We had all these kids coming. We saw their great need. They could have a quality education, a Christ-centered education.
They came to me one time, and all three of them, I knew something was going to happen, and it was. They decided that they were going to start a school.
And we thought, well, we can handle that financially. Nellene could move into our house and we could support her so she could teach for free. The guys could support Mark and so he could teach for free, and we could meet the needs of these kids.
When I started teaching here, and Nellene did, we did not take an income. We were living in community like the second chapter of Acts. So we had people working at the bank down here on Granville Avenue. We had people working at Pine Rest. We had someone teaching at Grand Rapids Public Schools. One was a professor at Calvin. So all those incomes together, we shared that together. And that allowed us to get this school off the ground without paying the teachers.
All summer long, we just couldn't find a building to actually have it in.
We were really struggling with finding a building for the school. This was going on just 1 month before the school was to open. We had students enrolled. We still didn't have a building.
And the kids would ask us, are we still going to have the school? We said, yep, we just don't know where it's going to be. The church had already said that we could use the church basement, but the fire marshal had said no. And so summer basically was almost over, and we still didn't know where the school was going to be.
Friday before Labor Day weekend, school's supposed to start the day after, the fire marshal said that we could use the church for 1 year, but we had to fireproof the ceilings in the basement. So as a community, we all painted all the ceilings with fire retardant paint. The church said we could use the basement as long as their seniors could continue using their shuffleboard court in the basement every Tuesday morning. So that meant that every Monday night we had to move Mark's classroom aside, and then we'd have to put Mark's classroom all back together again.
So that's when we did some serious looking, and we were coming up empty-handed.
And then finally we had to look at the building that we're in for the elementary, which was right behind the church. And we didn't want it for so many different reasons. One was that it was mammoth. It had 19 classrooms, and we had only 19 kids.
What are you gonna do, put one kid in each room? You know, so it was almost ridiculous, but at the same time we thought, okay, you know what? We're going to step out in faith.
We felt at the time that it would be really too big, but the Lord had much bigger plans for the school than we had, and knew that we would need a building this size.
A group of us walked around this building.
We all, as a group, started to pray. Is this the direction that you want for us? Is this the new thing that you're calling us to?
And I remember God just speaking to me, and this does not happen often, but he spoke to me. He said, you are standing on holy ground. And I thought, you know what? This is it. This is where we have to be. We didn't have the money.
And they said, will you give us $120,000? And Ken said, yes, we will. And then they said, will you give us $40,000 down this month? And Ken said, yes, we will. And we just like, yes, we will. We didn't sign anything. We just got up and left. And we walked on the sidewalk. It was a July night and just looked at each other, just burst out laughing because we knew that we just committed ourselves to something we couldn't possibly do. You know, it took a year to get $3,000. How are we going to get $40,000 in the next couple of weeks?
So Miss D, she actually sat down with a group of local business leaders in the area.
She just told about the first year and the vision for what we could do with a Christ-centered education in Roosevelt Park.
At the end, they all wrote checks, and the checks added up to $45,000. So it was more than what we needed. And I think that's kind of the story of the school, is that God is always supplying more than what we needed. And I think just leaning in on God, we're going to find, he always surprises us.
I heard that from him, and I went over to Dr. Box and I said, they did it again, Kay, they did it again. And right away, John says, and the Lord was with them, and that's why they were able to do it.
It was our defining miracle that showed us that money wasn't going to stand in the way of what God was going to do here, and that he would meet our needs, and he'd even go beyond that.
They came to me, and John said, I would like to work out a curriculum. So there they were, just as intense as could be. I said, well, if the two of you aren't going to be able to do that, you have to get some other teachers there.
The confidence that Betty Bosma and Catherine Block put in us, we can't underestimate how valuable that was, because We were pretty naive thinking that we could start this school, but with their help, their guidance, their leadership, they helped us navigate the early waters of where we're going with this school.
At that point, we knew we were going to be much bigger, and we slowly grew. We never dreamed of having middle school.
We had kids who were leaving 6th grade, but were they were out and tossed to the wind. They were saying, we can't find a school like this.
We went to the board and said, we really feel like we need a middle school. There was some hesitation, and one board member said, well, if we vote for this, we have to promise we'll never have a high school. And then about 6 years later, we just felt like same thing was happening with our 8th grade graduates, that they were getting to the schools, that some were getting into great schools and some couldn't, and most of it became clear because we had 9 kids in a charter experiment and it didn't work out, and the parents pulled them all out, and we had 9 9th graders at Potter's House in February, and we didn't have a 9th grade. And so we're just trying to teach them in our spare time, and then we're thinking like, maybe God's calling us to have a high school.
Good evening. As John mentioned, 4 years ago in 1998, we opened the doors to 20 9th graders and 11 10th graders. Now in our 4th year, those 31 students have grown into a high school, grades 9 through 12, of 140 students. And those 20 9th graders are now the senior class that you see standing before you, including the 5 young men who started in our school in kindergarten. It's my privilege to present to you the 2002 graduating class of the Potter's House Christian High School.
It's always been about what is the next generation going to look like, and how are we going to produce resilient followers of Jesus.
I grew up in a community of hopelessness, and Potter's House represents all the things that I was deprived of, and it gives it to this community.
There's 2 things that we've learned in our journey at Potter's House. One is dependence, and the other is expectation. So dependence, we've literally been dependent on God for 40 years, and even prior to that. But there's never been a time in our history where we didn't have to worry about the next payroll. It's always been by faith. And to be in that situation for 40 years and seeing all the ways that God comes through time after time in the most difficult situations is a huge faith builder. And the other part is expectation. We thought we were going to be this small school, volunteer teachers of 30 kids, and look what God's given us. This, 600 kids, a high school, an elementary. We now own the church and the parsonage.
All of us who struggle in some way need a lighthouse. We need something to point us. Potter's House has been that lighthouse.
There's this vision in the Bible of all different people coming together to just be one. And that's what we have here.
Okay, we'll get right into it. So tell us your name and your role at the Potter's House.
I've been at the Potter's House for the past 8 years. I started here as a middle school science teacher, teaching 6th, 7th, and 8th graders.
I've been at the Potter's House for 11 years, and I've never worked with a better staff. They're not just great academically. Most of them either have a master's degree or are on their way to a master's degree. I guess the way that I would best summarize the teachers at the Potter's House is that they all love their subject matter, but that's secondary to loving kids into loving God.
And the best way to describe the teachers at the Potter's House are domestic missionaries. Missionaries are a whole different clientele of people. They live what they speak. The teachers here and the administration are all that.
My father was a teacher, my grandmother was a teacher, I have an aunt who was a teacher. It seems like education was in my family. And I knew, I think from my middle school years, that I wanted to teach.
The past 3 years I've been part of the Wonder Academy, which has been an interdisciplinary project-based learning program that we've started. I grew up seeing a lot of kids my age not having schools to go to. Even in Grand Rapids, there are places in need of schools. And I was introduced to the Potter's House through Mr. Boy, and I think I knew in my heart that this was a place that lined up with how I grew up as a missionary kid, but also what I want to do in the future, starting schools and providing educational opportunities for students who are in need of places to learn.
So I started in 2005. So I've been working with the Potter's House for 16 years now. I always help coach like the sports things and whatever however I can get involved, I try to get involved.
I was kind of afraid to teach in a school that had so much diversity. And I literally got down on my knees and said, God, I know you do not want me to teach at the Potter's House. And I was stricken with, how do you know? How do you know what I want for you? You've not asked me. And I just wept that in my arrogance, I had thought to take the place of God. And I started praying, and I knew immediately that I needed to submit an application. I did it the next day.
The thing that kind of solidified what I really liked about Potter's House, it was many different things. One of them was that I was able to speak my own language and communicate with students through that and teach them through that. The other thing was like sharing the history with some students coming from a different country at a certain age, adjusting to a new culture and a new language, and then just going through that learning process and that growing process. Those connections culturally, but also intellectually and spiritually, that whole combination really just made it feel like it was the place for me.
When I graduated Potter's House, my dream was to be a teacher, and that's still like the same dream that I have. Just wherever God calls me to be a teacher, I don't know that yet, but it's definitely to be a teacher. I know that for sure. And like I loved being here. I loved being at school. I'd even get in trouble sometimes to stay at school longer, but it's good. I love the Potter's House, and I definitely feel loved here.
We have these staff devotions every morning. That puts us all on the same page. We understand again, why are we here? What's the point? What's the mission? You know, it's not about one teacher trying to up another teacher. It's about what do we do for these kids and how do we make ourselves better? How do we create a community, you know, where Jesus is lifted up, where he's worshiped, where he's followed. And that was something actually we did from the very early days of the school. Nellene and I, the first two teachers, would pray every morning before the students came. There were even days that they'd be knocking on the door, like our prayers were going too long.
So I think when it comes to like our mission, I'm equipping students, and it seems like when you're looking at it up close, it looks like I'm just equipping them to get to the test or to meet the learning targets. But what I'm doing is I'm working through the student's mind and their soul and just like their aspirations as well. And it's a very abstract thought because you think, oh, it's just math, but what about all the other things that allow us to do these things and to continue growing? So when I think about my faith, I think about how my faith impacts the way I see my students and how I see my profession, which is really nothing about me. It's all about serving and serving others and how that can be extended to serve others. Because the goal of it all is to establish shalom, to establish the right relationships that God has and wants for us with one another, with our world, and with Him. And if I can do that in a small place like my classroom, hopefully that can go outside of my classroom into the world.
I have teachers who will help transport kids to and from school because transportation's a big issue. I have teachers who pay attention to what a kid's eaten for lunch that day or what food might be on the table at home. We've gone grocery shopping for some families who we just know that they're in a place or in their time of need.
Every learner is so important. And we work to make sure that every learner has a chance. We're doing some training at the high school right now. We're learning how to scaffold better. And I didn't have any English learner training, and I didn't have any special education training. But I'm learning how to do those things because we get professional development that makes us better teachers so that we can meet all learning levels, all learning styles, all kind of motivations even. We get training so that we can do that, and that's what makes our staff so effective.
As somebody who had immigrated to the United States at a young age, who had gone through that experience and that process and just the adjustment period, I started to see it is more than just languages that unite us, it's the experiences. And it is what we live through and how we use what we live through to continue moving forward. So when I can use that with my students, sharing our stories and seeing how God is preparing us, that's just everything for us.
I would say one of the early milestones was Patty Stoner starting a discipleship program for middle school kids. And every Wednesday, a mentor would come in and work with small groups of middle school kids. And they were able to really be vulnerable and transparent and really share about their struggles and what they were really going through. And it really made them grow in their faith. They were taught to memorize scripture. One year they memorized the entire book of James. Some years it was some big chapters from Matthew. But all of that gave them a spiritual faith, a spiritual conviction that we see now in our high school kids, our seniors. That discipleship program has gone up there. And I see kids with maturity, with conviction in their faith. They have poise. And I feel it's because of the fact that we have poured into them what it means to be a Christian and be a Jesus follower. To be a Jesus follower means, I think, to live with hope. To live with the idea that there is nothing too great that you can't, no challenge too big. The fact that God is not going to abandon you, that He is with you, that this journey you're not going to go alone. And I think our kids get that message, and I think it begins to internalize in them. And we see some kids who are just booming in their faith. I mean, they have a real understanding of who God is and how their identity, how it's wrapped up in God. So for me, if I teach them anything, it would be that. I mean, I love teaching all the subjects, math, reading, social studies. I love teaching that. But if I can teach them, that to follow Jesus is the best thing you're ever going to do in your life, I'm good with that.
I volunteer in the science class and kindergarten.
I come in on Wednesdays and I do the Wednesday program.
We see volunteers everywhere, out in the hallways, in classrooms, in the libraries. They're the backbone of our school. They are. They give us the support that we can't do on our own. We can't reach every single kid, and they're the ones that come alongside those kids who are struggling, and they give them the support they need.
When parents enroll their children, they commit to 25 service hours for a year. Now, most parents can meet that, but parents are busy. Some of them are working or have little kids, and it's really challenging. So that's where our volunteers can come in and fill in the gap when parents aren't able to do that, such as the mailings is one of them. Tutoring students, math, science. They also help in the office with clerical things. They work in the library. Sometimes we need dusting done around the place. They've planted bulbs outside.
Yeah, so this school is built around volunteers. We could not do this without them.
Well, that's one of the power of the school. It's like you come into this place, you meet people who are very different from you, whether you're a volunteer or a donor or a teacher or a student. You enter into their lives and it changes everything.
There's so many different types of people here. Like, I always wanted to be here because there's always something interesting you can learn. And people from different cultures, they think a different way. So they bring a whole different opinion to something that you might have a certain opinion on, or your family might have an opinion on. You can have the best parents in the world, they just can't do that. You need other kids that have just their own perspective. And I might not have realized that as a kid, but that's what it was. That's the draw.
We always, as a family, prayed about having a school that is urban, and we lived in the same area, shopped, went to church. So coming to the Potter's House, working here for a little bit, I realized, this is the place I want to raise my kids.
It is in the history of the school to have all of these different ethnicities and language and cultures in one place. And as it has continued, because it has worked so well, it continues to invite that and it continues to nurture that.
There is no one group majority in the school. The majority of kids in the school are kids of color. The majority of kids in the school are kids that are going to need some assistance. There are a lot of kids too that have a lot of means, but you don't know it. And so everyone fits in, and it's like, so there's not these distinctions. Schools can look diverse, but then you look at the lunchroom and you see all the Hispanic kids eating together, the black kids eating together, white kids, Asians. Potter's House is like, it's just a free-for-all. Everybody is with everybody, and it makes no difference.
Sometimes we'll have students come into the Potter's House, and they are not used to that kind of a diverse setting, and I'll see them wanting to gravitate to one group or gravitate to another group, and there just aren't groups to gravitate to because it's so when I describe it to people, I tell them it's like heaven ought to be. It's what I picture heaven to be, because it's not the African kids and the African American kids and the Hispanic kids and the white kids and the Asian kids. It's the kids, and they're all together every day.
I think one of the primary benefits is they have families here that look like our family. We just didn't have a lot of families that looked like ours that went to the previous school. We came to the Potter's House and families looked like ours, but also there were families from around the world that we could not just learn about, but they invited us in. We could enter into some of those relationships.
I look at students in my classroom saying everyone brings a gift to the classroom. They all have gifts to bring, and we're not really going to be a community until we accept all the gifts everybody's bringing, that everybody has something to offer in our classroom. And I want every kid to know, no matter where they are on the spectrum, that they fit, they belong in here. We need them, and so we don't operate as a class until we feel like we are one together. We move together, we grow together. I want every kid to know that there is a place for them. And I think once that happens, then good stuff happens. When kids feel like they belong, then they start to produce in ways they didn't think they could.
It's not that they don't see differences, they embrace differences. As I see new students come in, they're the same way. Their eyes are opened up like my eyes were opened up. And they kind of blossom also and see, hey, maybe everything I've heard about this other race or this other socioeconomic group, maybe that's not true. Maybe we're really all the same, and our differences make us richer.
I was just amazed when my parents walked through the hallways here, and I remember them saying this place very much felt like the school that I grew up in, a missional identity for people from all kinds of backgrounds.
Potter's House seeks to provide a solid education for all kids that God calls to walk in those doors. Kids of different countries, kids with families of, different social strata, kids that had an easy life, kids that have struggled every day of their life.
I think the Potter's House is a beautiful reflection of every tribe and tongue of people from all over the world learning to encounter Jesus and learning to love their neighbor and learning to open their hearts and expand their hearts to a broader community. So that doesn't say a lot about education or all of that, but I'm just saying about to me, it's just a beautiful experience of people coming together and loving each other and finding out what it's like to be part of the beautiful kingdom of God. And in the midst of that, we hope that we're training resilient followers of Jesus who will change the world.
It doesn't matter where they come from. At this point in time, they'll have somebody there that can relate to them, and they can work with them. And if they don't, they'll find a way. God will provide a way for them here at the Potter's House.
Most people who come to the Potter's House are usually blown away first by how the building looks. And they're just so impressed by how beautiful it is, how clean. Then they meet a student. And they walk up, and the student says, "Welcome to the Potter's House," and they stick their hand out. And immediately they're taken back by that because they had not seen that before. We tell students, people are in your house. Don't run away from them, welcome them. For the thing they're going to remember is you about the Potter's House. Yes, we have lockers and they're beautiful and the aesthetic is beautiful. We have a gym, we have classrooms and beautiful furniture. But other schools have that too. What they don't have, it's you, it's our students. So people walk away with this joy of people welcomed me in their house. I want that, I want to come back. And we try to be intentional about that hospitality. And our students are growing in that because we believe that's part of their Christ-centered education.
He kept telling me, "Mom, I want to go to a Christian school." And I was thinking, that's kind of expensive. When we went to church, we prayed about it. And there was two ladies there. And they said, "Well, there's this little school that just opened up. It's called the Potter's House. You pay according to your income." So I checked it out. And sure enough, and I enrolled him in the Potter's House. when they heard about, my children coming to the Potter's House, they also came and enrolled their children in the Potter's House. One lady, she had about six kids. I brought my 2 grandsons here. Now I have great-granddaughters here.
One of the most important things for us was that our kids attend multicultural school. We looked into several different options, and together with our sons, we chose the Potter's House.
We want our students to be educated to the highest level possible, but we also want them to be able to relate to people who have very, very little education. We want people to be totally given to the kingdom. Students were just willing to go anywhere in the world within 48 hours at the drop of a hat. We want to train people that are totally focused on following Jesus and are resilient and have the spiritual formation so that, no matter what happens in culture, they're able to sustain their faith, which is no easy task, because we don't know if culture changes as much in the next 20 years as it did in the last 20 years. Who knows,
They added to what we were doing at home. They had the same kind of values. It wasn't like when they were in a public school. You learn all this in church, and then you go to school, and then they're teaching you other things, When we teach them things at home, they reinforce them at the school.
I'm currently serving as the middle school assistant principal. Our desire and our dream and hope for the middle school is that attention is definitely drawn to how are we intentionally forming our students spiritually, embedding into the day different ways that we could involve them into spiritual disciplines. Just like Wonder Academy, learning from our experiment there. The Wonder Academy is an interdisciplinary project-based learning opportunity for our 6th and 7th graders. We interact with the world in a holistic way. Instead of dividing them into different subjects in a compartmentalized way, could we bring the whole thing together? And that's one thread. The other is project-based, which we realized that students could learn more meaningfully through current event related projects that they could involve themselves in. So we learn through 2-month-long projects, 5 a year, where we're pursuing some deep questions that relate to our community, which is the third thread of Wonder, where we are reaching out to community engagement, where we're partnering with organizations to make the work that they're doing more meaningful.
The high school has grown immensely since I've been here. When I first started here in the high school, it was around 40 to 50 students. We're still a small school, but we have around 240 students as of today. We've had to grow our staff, grow our buildings. I've seen 2 or 3 different building renovation projects that went on, 2 major ones. 20 years ago when we started here, I didn't know if we'd ever have a nice building like this, or even the gym. It's just a blessing to walk in a facility like that where we can practice here at our school instead of searching for gyms. One thing I really appreciate about here at the Potter's House, being a little smaller school, kids are able to get connected and participate on a team, even if they've never really played before. They're able to start playing soccer and be part of that team and community. It's been great to offer all these different sports, different athletes, and seeing kids participating in there that maybe wouldn't have a chance at another place. We think the value of athletics helps train and teach our students for not only life here in high school, but life beyond high school. We think these athletics help build character. They have a sense of community, that we come together, and we're just developing core values that will help them in the future. So responsibility and character building is a big part of what we do in our athletic program.
I was able to be here through the growth that brought us a new wing of the school, opening up 8 or 9 new classrooms, a new gym on our campus. What a blessing to be able to expand our space, to be able to say to a number of new families, we have room, come be a part of it. Also taking the church space, renovating that, creating some beautiful classroom spaces out of a church basement, right? Art, computers, music, downstairs, science. That also opened up other spaces in the school building that we could make classrooms and learning spaces out of. It's been great to be a part of that growth and see how we can grow as a campus, but know that that stretches us too, that stretches us culturally. We're not all in the same 2 hallways anymore.
I've seen our school transform into an academically elite school. We've been expanding our programs with dual enrollment classes, allowing them to have business and leadership classes and marketing and social media classes as well. We've been opening up more AP classes.
And we also have partnerships with different universities in the area. Kuiper College, Cornerstone, Grace Christian University, and Calvin, in which we can do dual enrollment, offering those things to our students as well, so they can get college credit while in high school.
And what we notice is that the people between this school, the high school and the elementary school, are part of a demographic that are the fastest growing entrepreneurs in the country. So what we're trying to initiate is a business leadership class with one of our parents actually as the professor, and a marketing class in the spring. And we're looking to try to grow that each year so that our students can experience a college class in high school and come to that point where they can think to themselves, oh, I can do this. Because I think a lot of them being first generation high school graduates, and a lot of them never, not really knowing a lot of people who have been to college, they think it's like, oh, that's not for me, that's too hard, So we're trying to bring the college classrooms and different opportunities to the high school setting to allow them to visualize themselves in the future, and so that they can go down the paths that they want to serve God and society.
And I want to teach our students as they graduate how to handle their money well, how to handle insurance, life insurance, car insurance, when they buy their first house, homeowners insurance, how a mortgage works, just the common sense of not live paycheck to paycheck, save some money, pay yourself, save some money, and also, hey, are we giving? God has blessed us with this. And the importance of doing a budget, that you can do investments. So you can invest in your Roth IRA and know what that is and be able to invest in things you know.
A student can come as a freshman in high school knowing little to no English.
And they come to the Potter's House and we tell them, you're gonna be able to speak English in 5 years. We're gonna make it happen. You're gonna have summer school, we're gonna go through school and really help you speak English, because we believe it's a justice issue. But not only speak English and get into the Michigan Merit Curriculum, but we're gonna get you to college. You're gonna be the first, probably in your family, to attend college.
So we've had plenty of students come with no English from Honduras or Rwanda or the Congo, and now they've been at Cornerstone.
It doesn't matter whether there's riots, race riots, doesn't matter. Nothing interferes in our relationship. It's our relationship about God and our commitment to each other. The church doesn't have that bragging right because we're so separated. The Potter's House does. And so when you have political tension, racial tension, gender, there has to be a lighthouse that say, we're here, this is a safe haven. You're going to learn. We're going to love you. We're going to nurture you. We have it right here. The Potter's House can do that. And we begin with our students, getting them ready to teach in the name of Christ.
In a Christ Center school like that, it's not just a focus on math, it's not a focus on English or history, it's a focus on Christ, in how Christ is found through all subject areas. But the most important thing about a Christ Center school is just a review on our students, and just how we see that each one is handpicked, chosen by Christ, and that we're here to nurture and to allow them and to help them to grow into what Christ has for them. So when we think of our small classroom sizes, when we think of all of our teachers, we all share that in common, that we recognize that these are God's children and that we're here to help them see and discover what God has for them.
In all of our classes, we talk to kids about when you go to college, this belief will be questioned. This belief will be challenged. And how are you going to stand up to that? How do we say, this is what is true? And I'm willing to look at other things, and I'm willing to even change on some things, but when it comes down to the brass tacks, when it comes down to the ground floor, that's not shakable. And we do that with our students, and we have kids come back years later and say, you know what, the Potter's House prepared me to stand firm in my faith. The Potter's House prepared me to be a lifelong learner. The Potter's House prepared me to have a good talk with someone and not have it end up angry because we're on different sides of the political fence or with someone from a different religion or faith. But without being angry with each other, I learned how to have those kind of discussions at the Potter's House.
One of the programs we have at the high school is called Keeping It Real. The purpose is for us to listen well, understand well, disagree well, and agree well, recognizing that we aren't going to walk away with all the same views and agree at the same time with the same things. What we really want to instill in the kids is the topic is valuable, but relationship is more valuable. It's the same as if we disagree on something, it's okay if we disagree, but the relationship is more important.
One of the biggest challenges that our students face today is being pulled to this side or that side. And I think that what we're trying to teach our students at the Potter's House is that actually we're going to follow Jesus. And we're going to find that way that he's pulling us towards, because we might have dual citizenship, we might have citizenship in the United States or in another country, but whether we like it or not, we're all citizens of the kingdom of God, and we have to pursue his word in order to understand what it is that he designed us to do and to think and to love, which is him.
You know, following Jesus is one of the things that we are trying to get all of our kids to do, to be resilient followers of Jesus. That's what we want. Spiritual formation at the high school, we are intentional. We desire that the older disciple the younger. We have the seniors discipling the sophomores and the juniors discipling the freshmen. We have teachers discipling discipleship group leaders, so they're discipling juniors and seniors, right? So that everyone is being discipled or discipling someone else.
What I've really come to appreciate about Potter's House is it's not just a school, but it's urban ministry. And that is it's a good fit for me, but so many of the teachers and the faculty that we have at school, and some of the families, that's what they desire for their kids, and they want that too. We're going to talk about academics and we're going to talk about school culture, but we're going to load up on a bus, we're going to drive to Chicago, we're going to visit Christian Community Development Association, we're going to meet with urban ministry people and talk about what it's like to serve in a city.
I personally have seen the impact that the Potter's House has had on families, kids coming home and sharing what they're learning about God at school, and then parents coming back and saying, what is this? This is not what I understood about God, and us being able to say, this is who God is, and this is what God wants for your family and how he wants to bless your family.
These kids came here and they were failing in other public schools and come here and thrived. John told me one time they never lose a teacher to another school. They lost teachers who would go on the mission field, but I think all the difference was in the teachers' attitudes towards the kids. They saw this as a mission, not just a teaching assignment.
Growing up as missionary kids, both my wife and I, both of us definitely share a vision of going back into the mission field. Potter's House is a great model that I'm learning from that's continuing to minister to students of all kinds of backgrounds. I still remember my second or third year where I shared with a student after Bible class the gospel about Jesus and what he did for the student. And after that, this kid just could not put his Bible down. And it's moments like that that you realize that this is a place that is more than just a school. And we are ministering and serving families in their physical as well as spiritual needs. And we're doing that for our students too. And that would be what I would love to bring to wherever God leads us.
That 40 years later, we're still doing that. We're still a community-based nonprofit serving the community. So last spring during COVID, we opened up our gym to be a testing site. And then for people who needed food, we opened up our parking lot as a free food distribution center. We have churches using our chapel in order to worship on Saturdays and Sundays together. So I think that's what the supporters have really bought into is that this place has always been about people and making the sacrifice in order to sustain that ministry.
The way that we do faith and integration it's in everything we do. So it's not just how we welcome you and how we walk you through and serve you as a guest, but it's how you live in our house. So stopping to pray, Bible clubs, worldview class, which is unlike any other.
I think spiritual formation is big, definitely, especially as we thread it in through Wonder. One of the things that we are intentionally doing through Wonder Academy is that students don't have an isolated time, just 10 minutes a day that they're focusing on the Bible. How can we infuse their whole learning and integrate it into a biblical framework and worldview and involve them into spiritual discipline-like practices? We build in throughout the day journaling time where they're reflecting on either scripture that relates to the project that they're working on, or just an intentional time where we're reading through Acts together and integrating that into some of the questions that we're asking in our bigger project.
There is a culture at Potter's House. There's a way that we do school. We want it to be a place when you walk in that you sense this is a place where God is and that He's at work. This is a place where we are going to do school a certain way. One of my favorite trips with our faculty as a professional development opportunity, we loaded up in vans, we drove out to New York City for 2 days. We visited some of the high-performing charter schools, the ones you'll see on national news programs with lottery systems. How do you take a cross-section of urban kids and get them to college? And we wanted to get into those classrooms. We wanted to learn from those teachers and talk to those administrators. And all of them had a pretty strict culture, a way of doing school that they held to. High expectations, no excuses, right? And we've borrowed some of that language. We're using that here. Kids know when they come to Potter's House, we have high expectations for them. And we're gonna learn who they are, we're gonna learn what they're about, we're gonna learn what levels of reading they're at and math they're at, and we're gonna support them wherever they're at to help them grow.
The Potter's House is based on having faith in God. Of course we need money. Of course we need donations. Of course we all work hard for making sure that the school stays in business, essentially. But none of that would matter if it wasn't for faith, right? We believe that this is the mission that God has given us. This isn't just our job for all of us. These aren't our jobs. These are our vocations. Those are very different things. And that started with what, like 9 kids or something in the basement of a church? And now we have over 600 kids at the Potter's House. That in itself is miraculous.
There's 2 things that have not changed since when I was on the board to even today. They have a deficit at the end of the year, which everybody was on their knees for then and now, I'm sure. And the second thing that hasn't changed, they always have a waiting list of kids trying to get into the school. Those 2 things have not changed, which I think is really remarkable because other people are hearing it. And how can I get my kids into the school? You know, because they can see the difference of what happens.
I don't know. It's, to me, I can't wrap my head around it because 40 years, it seems like a lifetime, and yet, here's the thing, I still love doing what I do. And I love the kids, I love the staff. It's a place, I will tell you that many, many times when I get up in the morning, I would just say, I love my job.